Welcome to the Are We Idiots Show, where we question the status quo on society's important issues while mixing in plenty of laughs along the way. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, as always, Richard B. Kroll and Mark R. Weaver.
Mark R. Weaver, how are you? It's a sunny day in North America.
In North America, I like it. You're expanding your references.
Yeah, since our listeners are starting to increase a little bit, I wanted to acknowledge that people outside of Delaware County, and now a couple guys from Sweden, one guy from Sri Lanka, and a couple guys from the Malagasy Republic said they were doing a great job.
Sven from Sweden.
Right.
What was the guy from Malagasy? What was his name?
Omaha.
Oh, okay. As opposed to Omaha, the drill you used to do with the kids in basketball.
Not to be confused.
Wasn't that the Omaha drill or something you had? Or what was that? No, Omaha was the Peyton Manning
Omaha
thing.
Was Peyton Manning calling an
Utah drill.
Scrimmage.
You almost
the
killed
Utah drill.
Almost killed the girls.
And that was their favorite one, though, right?
They were bloodied. We'll have to bring that up at some other time. Richie, we always start with spreading your wisdom. What is your tip of the day?
You know, a lot of my tips throughout the years have focused on dieting, weight loss, workouts.
For no particular reason. No personal references there at all.
Nothing at all. Just strictly, that's what everybody seems to be most interested in.
Totally random.
But you know what? After watching, I just watched, I'm sure you'll be a big fan of it if you haven't seen it already, Ferrari versus Ford.
I just watched it last night.
Hey,
I loved it.
Just watched it last weekend. Loved the movie as well.
Right.
And
because I'm a car guy.
you're a huge
I always
car
have
guy.
been.
You got like 8 Maseratis in your legal garage in the backyard here. I was fascinated because Christian Bale, who plays the mechanic/driver,
Ken Miles.
Ken Miles, was also recently Dick Cheney in a movie.
Yep.
And if you pull up both pictures, it's like 100-pound difference.
Right.
So I started looking into it, and apparently Christian Bale is very, very well known for dramatic weight gains and weight losses.
Right. Yep.
And I thought, okay, wow, how does he lose 70 pounds in 3 months? You know what he does?
I don't know.
He doesn't eat.
He fasts.
He just doesn't eat. So, Christian, how do you do
it? It's not the most healthy.
What's your secret? I just don't eat. Well, what do you mean you just don't eat? Well, for 3 months, I drink water, a cup of coffee, and then 1 apple a day. So, folks, it's not that hard.
Right. Yeah.
Don't eat.
It's hard, but it's simple.
It's super simple.
Right. But it's hard. It's hard to do it because most people don't have that discipline.
They don't. You actually have to be a little crazy and super tough because I've gone 4 days without eating, but then I get dizzy. And the minute I start eating something, I'll eat 14,000 calories in one sitting.
I've seen you do that, by the way.
But guys, girls, if you want to lose weight, just don't eat. It's that simple.
Yeah. Calories out versus calories in. That equation, it works pretty good.
Forever.
Thanks for that tip, Richie. And we also often talk about our patrons, and we thank our patrons regularly. This week, I want to make an appeal for additional patrons, and we've done that from time to time, but just a little more specifics. I've gotten feedback that people would like to know, when I say platinum, gold, silver, and bronze patron, and you can do that off of our supporting listeners tab of our website or our Patreon site, and there's a link there. What does that mean? A platinum sponsor, the top of the rung, Richie, is $15 a month. So you can be a platinum sponsor, and it's really, to use a colloquialism, is that what the word from?
Colloquialism, sure.
Yeah, from the Philadelphia area. That's like 4 Wawa coffees in a month.
One a week.
You can be a gold sponsor, $10 a month. That's maybe 2.5 large Wawa coffees a month.
With no cream.
A silver, $8 a month. And a bronze, $5 a month. So literally for one Starbucks coffee latte, you could be a bronze sponsor of the Are We Idiots show. We'd encourage you to do that. We do need your help to continue to grow the reach of the show. Rich mentioned it. We're starting to grow the listenership, and we couldn't do it without our patrons, and we ask all of you listening to please consider that. People tend to hear that, and they say, oh, well, someone else will give. Well, no. We're asking you to give. If you're hearing this right now, we're asking you to give. Thanks for considering.
My friend Paul French probably has about 35 custom suits in his closet. I guarantee there's over $500 in forgotten 10s and 20s stuffed in his suit pockets.
And you know he drinks at least a couple cups of coffee a month.
At least.
Thanks, everyone. And on our show today, we have our Idiot of the Week. Rich has some nominees for me. Then we're going to talk about analytics versus gut. And this week, I promise not to introduce next show like I did last week. And we're actually going to talk about analytics versus gut, even though I was confused last week. And then we're going to conclude the show, Richie. I'm going to highlight some, not very many, but a few of the worst coaching decisions ever. Because in our analytics versus gut talk, we're going to focus a lot on sports.
Oh, there's
today.
a couple memorable ones that still blow my mind.
You could probably pick out some of them, but we'll talk about that. So, Richie, without further ado, you have some Idiot of the Week nominees. Lay them on me.
Since my tip of the day was pretty fast, I have 3 shorter ones.
Okay, lay them on me.
I just couldn't choose which 2 out of these 3. All right, ready?
Yes, sir.
Cincinnati police arrested a man early February after he called 911 and the police more than 25 times to help him locate his lost hoodie. 32-year-old Harves Gardner, or maybe...
That might be the first problem. His name's Harves.
Or Arve. I don't know how to...
Hervé?
Hervé
like Villachez?
Hervé Shilavez Gardner called 911 and requested police assistance in his home. When police responded to the Northside home, they were greeted by a completely stewed Gardner who had bloodshot eyes, could barely talk, and asked them to drive him around to help him find a hooded sweatshirt he had lost earlier that evening. Officers told Gardner they couldn't help him and to please go to bed. But Gardner ignored the officer's suggestion and instead called the police over and over and over again, including 911, giving them different locations to respond to each time. Police returned to Gardner's home, but it wasn't to help him find the hoodie. He was arrested and charged with felony disrupting public services, which apparently is a 4th-degree felony in Ohio.
I would think that would have been a misdemeanor, but well, I guess whatever.
Yep, 1 rung up.
Yeah, I mean, he's an idiot. I guess it kept other people from getting 911 services. If that was the case, then he should be punished. I don't know about a felony, but he's an idiot and definitely qualifies to be nominated.
Heading down south to our favorite idiot state.
Not Florida.
Wouldn't be Florida, would it? 43-year-old Danny Lee Wyatt of Titusville, Florida, said he was driving home from a liquor store with 2 purchased bottles of liquor.
There's a shock. He's got 3 names, Danny Lee, and he's driving home from a liquor store. Do you have fireworks in the car, too?
Most likely. On his way home, he missed the turn for the street to his house. And where he ended up going, he proceeded to get stuck on train tracks. Wyatt said he tried to flag down the train's engineer, but when he realized the locomotive wasn't going to stop, he jumped out of the vehicle. After the crash, Wyatt reached into his Kia Rio wreckage and grabbed a few things, including the 2 liquor bottles, which he said he immediately guzzled at the scene because he was so scared. Police said Wyatt went home but came back to talk to the officers. Wyatt hence failed a field sobriety test but refused to take the breathalyzer and was given a DUI and arrested on the spot.
So help me. When he got, quote, stuck on the railroad tracks, my guess is he missed the road altogether, and that's how he got stuck on, right? Like, because if you go across railroad tracks on a road, it's no big deal. But if you miss the road and you go off, and that's probably why he got hung up.
Yes, my guess it was a drunken turn
Exactly.
which lodged his car on the tracks.
Exactly.
And then he wanted to say, officers, I was sober. I just bought the bottles.
Meanwhile, the car gets hit by a train, and he doesn't. The bottles don't break. That's his story. How about just the bottles broke? Why? It's like, oh my goodness.
But he tried to say, oh, I wasn't drunk when I was driving. I guzzled the liquor after.
Right. Why didn't he just break the bottles and say they broke broke in the train when the train hit the car.
There's a lot of things he could have come up with, except for that.
Drunk, fat, and stupid's no way to go through life, son.
Uh,
Nominee number 3, Richie.
A Mexican man has reportedly suffered a painful 3-day erection after taking a sexual stimulant meant for mating bulls.
You can stop right there. That's a winner.
This wins. You don't even need to hear the rest, right?
Preemptive. I got to hear the rest.
You do. This is going to win. According to Peruvian news outlet La Repubblica, the man took the substance ahead of a planned encounter with a 30-year-old woman. He was an older man. He bought this extremely powerful Viagra-like on steroids drug in Veracruz, which is used by farmers in that region to invigorate bulls to inseminate cows.
I'm sure it was fully FDA approved.
You don't even need to read the label on this one. You know it's going to work. An image has surfaced on social media shows the man lying down on a hospital bed, clearly in pain.
Was the sheet propped up?
Well, they have it faded out, like when they block out someone's eyes on a photo. They have that part of his body, blacked out. The Randy lad apparently tried to play it cool, hoping its effects would wear off. Doctors that treated him are quoted as saying he was hospitalized in the Specialized Hospital 270 of the city of Reynosa. We hope he's okay.
By the way, there's another guy that has some kind of weird reaction to getting high, and he had a 12-hour erection from getting high. And he traced it back to, like, even when he was in high school, when he got high, he used to get an erection from getting high. So and it happened like twice in the last couple months where he got high and he had like 12-hour and like 8-hour erections.
It's very dangerous, actually.
I've heard. Believe me, I have the opposite problem at age 56.
Yeah, you're more 12 seconds.
Richie, like I said, that is a no-brainer for me. They're all idiots, and I always prefer the ones that people are drunk. I love that because they're just stupid. But whenever you take a bull Viagra and in the hopes of performance, I guess, with a younger woman, you deserve everything you got, and he probably got off easy. I mean, that stuff probably could have killed him. He probably got a heart attack, a stroke, a blood clot. I mean, God knows what was in that.
When you think about it, the average male is 180 pounds.
Yeah.
The average bull is like 1,800 pounds.
I know.
What it takes, I mean, it's literally like somebody who's benching 100 pounds to all of a sudden go under and they put 1,000 pounds on the bench.
I mean, right? Seriously, I mean, he's lucky he didn't kill himself.
Could have exploded his, well.
Well, he might have.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking of it that way, yeah.
That was good, Richie. Should we send him $1? I mean, he needs a lot more than that.
I think he needs more.
Some pesos?
I think he needs more than that.
All right, so we're going to shift gears now, Richie. And as I started to introduce last week, and I will introduce briefly this week, this came from a email exchange or a text exchange, largely complaining about our coach Doug Peterson, I think, or what was the Phillies manager got fired? Gabe Kapler. Since we're based in the Philly area, we have a group of us that are fans, and we were questioning their judgment. And this led to Rich and I deciding to do a show on the use of analytics versus gut decision. And before we go into that, most of this show is going to be focusing on the sports realm. One, because sports is very popular in our culture, but also you can make a good argument that analytics has had the most impact in the sports realm so far. We did do a show back, show 56, episode 56, last June, on big data. So if you want a primer, I like that
Primer?
word. If you want a primer for this episode on the data part of it, the data, big data part of this, and this is where all the analytics is coming from, all this accumulation of data. On that show, I'll test your memory, Rich. On that show, we learned that every day there's 2.5 quintillion bytes of data collected in the world, and a quintillion is 1 million to the 5th power, we learned.
A million times a million times a million times a million times a million.
Times 2.5. So
That's a lot.
An astronomical amount of data. We learned about dynamic pricing on that show. I tried to teach Rich about supply and demand and restaurant pricing, but he didn't like that.
I still don't like it.
We talked about autonomous cars, IoT, which is a big growth industry. We talked about structured data, unstructured data. So that's all I'm going to say about that show. But I'd encourage you, listeners. It was a sleeper episode. It's one of my favorites last year, maybe because we're in tech.
I know. I use it at night to go to sleep.
That was good. But go back and listen to that, episode 56 from last June. But Richie, I know before we talked about sports, you want to make a couple comments about analytics versus gut in other areas of society that aren't necessarily sports related.
Yeah, we did cover a lot of it in the big data, but we didn't really compare and contrast how useful it is.
Correct.
And the reason why we're focused on sports in this show is because, like you mentioned 2 seconds ago, it seems to be the most prevalent and has had the most impact in sports over the last, say, 10 years, maybe 20 years. Although it's starting to explode because of the internet. And if you look at even business to business, business to consumer, IT security, a lot of these organizations are starting to use behavioral analysis, machine learning, artificial intelligence to go through data much, much faster than a human could, and then also make more intelligent decisions as the data becomes smarter and smarter, and these machine learning.
Even research, like scientific research, is actually using this predictive data. Better more than like science lab work.
Yeah, even in pathology. I might have mentioned this in the big data show, but they're now taking millions of cancer slides and looking for customized treatment, which takes months for a human to figure out.
Right.
And in hours, a machine can figure out,
right.
Based on what we've seen. So it's really, really, getting to Cyberdyne and the Terminator. But the reason why we focus on sports is because big data, data analytics in general, machine learning, artificial intelligence has really just exploded in the last 5 years. It's been around a lot longer in sports, and it really started just with manual computation. So you'd have a scout go to a baseball game, or you'd have a scout go to the NFL Combine, and they would jot down like,
right,
with a hand. Oh, that guy got down the first baseline in 3 seconds. That guy's 40 time, is
right,
4 seconds, whatever.
Right.
And then they started adding in, well, we need to know how strong he is, how high can he jump, how well does he go to his right, his left, what's his shooting percentage, on and on and on. And it just became a manual mess. And I'm not to steal any of your thunder coming up, but I guess with Billy Beane and the Oakland A's and Moneyball, he was credited with being the first person to use what was called sabermetrics, which is actually taking all this data and feeding it into computers to spit out more accurate predictions about players' ability, outcomes of scenarios, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and let's be honest, it changed the course of sports, not just baseball, and it took a little time because the old way of doing things, the scouts or the old kind of experience, the gut, the intuition, that is an established piece of Americana and certainly of sports, and people don't like change. Right, so it took a while, and it took success to prove that it worked. And it wasn't just Billy Beane. It went from Billy Beane to this guy Theo Epstein, a guy who the Red Sox hired in 2004, who had never played baseball. He'd never played baseball at a professional level. It was like unheard of at that point because at least Billy Beane played. Theo Epstein was just like I think he was a Wharton MBA or something like that. He had never played. He was just a numbers guy, and this guy, the owner of the Red Sox, hired him. And the owner of the Red Sox had made a lot of money with analytics in like the financial world, so he was kind of a trendsetter as well, putting Theo Epstein as the GM. And by the way, Theo Epstein not only helped break the curse of Bambino with the Red Sox, he also got hired by the Cubs, and the Cubs won after 85 years or something like that. So he was really influential there. In hockey, The Blackhawks started doing it in the 2009, and they won in a 6-year period. They won 3 Stanley Cups. The San Antonio Spurs, like Rich said, some of that was early on where they were not doing the sabermetrics piece, but they were doing other analytics. And I have to really, I don't even like the guy, but I have to credit Rick Pitino. In basketball, when they bring in the three-point line, maybe mid-'80s in the pros. I think it was right around early '80s, mid-'80s.
35 years ago. Yeah.
Right. And even in college basketball, they didn't have it till the mid-'80s. And Rick Pitino was at Providence at the time, and he was really the first coach to realize the importance of the three-point field goal. And statistically, even though they didn't keep the stats like they do now, he realized that they shouldn't be taking 2-point shots inside the arc. They should be taking 3-point shots. And if you took,
if you're just inside the arc, right? It
just
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, if you're just inside,
it's roughly the same shot, whether it's 19 feet or 20 feet.
Exactly. And he put the emphasis on the 3-point shot, and really, it has totally changed basketball.
Completely changed.
It's a totally different game from when you and I were young, and from most of history. It was a big man's game, and now it's unquestionably a guard's game. And even the big men now shoot threes. So
our own Joel Embiid doesn't like to go inside. He likes to take three-point shots all game.
And one of the geniuses of the Spurs and Popovich was that not only do they take a lot of 3-point shots, but they put an emphasis on defending the 3-point shot. And I think that's the next phase in pro basketball, where you look at the Toronto Raptors, why they won last year, because they defend the 3-point shot very well. The Golden State Warriors, of course, did that as well for many years. But a lot of the teams now, they have to have perimeter players that can defend the 3-point shot. Lastly, before we go on, Pro Golf. Pro Golf has a thing called ShotLink that they've been doing since 2003. So there's all kinds of different data, stats that are kept. They have all these cameras and lasers all over the course. So all these players can analyze their shots and figure out where their weaknesses are. So, It's here to stay, Rich, but the topic of this show is really, where does this end? Does it get to the point where computers are coaches?
This is where we're going to go with this show and
Right.
try to figure out the importance of analytics versus just pure gut feel and a knowledge of the game, right? And which one is more important, if there is. Now, going back, I did some digging. I looked at the last 8 years, because analytics, where you're really applying machine learning and computer intelligence to kind of decipher a lot of the stuff, is more prevalent in the last 5 to 8 years than it was 15, 20, when some of the people first started in analytics. But I looked at the 4 different major sports. If you look at the top 8 teams that are credited with either implementing early or really have the biggest analytic teams on their staff: Astros, Dodgers, Red Sox, Yankees, Cubs, Rays, A's, Indians. It's obvious that it's working in baseball.
Right.
The Dodgers have lost in the NLCS twice and the World Series twice. Red Sox have won the World Series twice. Yankees lost twice in the ALCS. Cubs won the World Series, lost in the NLCS twice. Astros won.
Well, they had some other advantages, evidently.
Well, that's another one. Another topic. How much did the cheating, although they were considering it part of the whole analytics, that we're analyzing other team signals.
And using trash cans to signal our players. Now they're getting beamed in spring training. Did you see that?
Yeah. That's going to be a tough year for them, trust me, with paybacks. Hockey, Blackhawks, Lightning, Bruins, Sabres, Hurricanes, Leafs. Now, less prevalent, but Blackhawks won twice. They haven't won in the last 4 years, but they won twice. They finished, they lost in the conference championship. Bruins have lost in the Stanley Cup Finals 3 times. A couple of these teams haven't made any.
Yeah, the
impact.
Leafs have been disappointing, because they were supposedly supposed to have the best young farm team, and they've kind of crashed.
Avalanche, Leafs, and Sabres haven't even made the conference finals, yet they're
Right.
considered some of the bigger analytics teams.
Right.
Football. I was going to say football might be where it's
contrarian.
least impactful. The only team, the Patriots, right?
Right.
And Patriots actually, what's the word for, not sabotage, but hid. Belichick's so smart. When he's onto something that's a competitive advantage, he doesn't let everybody know. Like some people want to promote it and talk about it.
Who'd they steal it from, by the way, the Patriots? This system they got.
Who knows? Maybe Billy Bean. George Muldoon's not going to be happy with that comment.
We know they're not afraid of stealing stuff or doing things corrupt, right?
But out of the top,
that's for you, George.
Out of the top 8 teams that use analytics, only 3 of them have won a Super Bowl once, and the Patriots 3 times. So it's not working as much in football, and I'll get to that when we cross that bridge in our discussion. In basketball, same as hockey. A lot of teams have gotten to their conference finals. Only one team, the Spurs, have won a championship. None of the others considered the top 8, Rockets, Celtics, Mavericks, Sixers, Spurs, Thunder, Nets, Jazz, have won a championship. So in order, it's working really well in baseball. It seems to be working pretty well in hockey. It's really not working to anything measurable in the NFL or the NBA.
But I disagree with your premise that it's really been mostly in the last 8 years. I think it goes way back. And
intelligent analytics.
It's definitely increasing at a rapid pace, and it's getting much more sophisticated in the last 8 years. But a lot of this stuff goes way back.
I did say that,
Yes. So let's get into it, Richie. So information versus intuition, and when you were describing earlier how the gut or the old way of doing things, it really is data. It's just, I guess it's a matter of how you use the data, because that was data. Gut is data. It's just a question of how is that data used, and is that data used is the data being used meaningful? So, what do you think about that? Is at some level a gut decision really is data, but I think where you run into the trend being more towards the analytics versus the gut is that the human mind is finite in its ability to process data quickly. You already talked about it with the pathology thing. And you can see where there's so many different scenarios, and in real time in a game, for instance, how can the human mind bring in all those data points and make as good a decision as a computer?
Well, you can't, and that's where, and we've seen a lot of coaches under pressure, time's running out, maybe the headset, is not working, somebody's changed up a defense or done something differently, and all of a sudden a coach has to make a fairly split-second decision, but the brain's clouded. Where
right.
That's
too much data.
Yeah, or pressure and stress isn't obviously going to impact a computer.
Right.
So here's how I'm looking at this. A gut decision, though, is based on data. It's based on something you've seen or something you feel based on something you've seen.
But it might be bad data. That's my point.
Well,
it's not the best data necessarily. That's the point. Is like, if you have these intuitions, those intuitions are affected by emotions and biases. True data analysis isn't, and that's why I think that ultimately it's going to keep going that way, because every human has biases. Every human has limitations in their brain calculating functions and time, and situational awareness, and what's the word I'm looking for? Availability bias. That's the thing. So the availability of information also biases your decision.
Yeah, but you got to also. This isn't just an overarching category, one size fits all, boil the ocean. There are different ways analytics are used, right? There are analytics that are used in the draft to evaluate college players coming out.
Right.
There are analytics used in all sorts of sports scenarios, individual plays. You have to understand who you're up against defensively and who you're up against, what your offense can do. There's a lot of different categories analytics can play in, and I think analytics works better in some categories than others, meaning, for me, the gut decision is based on a small sample size, and analytics is based on a very long, heavy data sample size.
Right.
In its, in its empirical wisdom, analytical data is more prevalent because it's taking on more scenarios. So statistically, it's going to give you better odds for something.
Right.
However, in tight game situations, those sample sizes don't take into account behavioral reactions, how humans will react.
Right.
And that's where I think a coach can say, in the moment, skip the analytics for the last 10 years or even 10 minutes. I just gave the ball to somebody. We ran the ball 3 times in a row. He got 5 yards each time, and they knew it was coming. To all of a sudden not give it to him on the 5th time because analytics says pass the ball, right, where my gut says I should probably run the ball again, right? Decisions like that. Or so-and-so's great when we're up 20 or down 20, but when the pressure's on, he can't hit the side of a barn. And players,
Yeah, but
there's pressure players, there's regular season players versus postseason players, there's clutch players, and a lot of that, the coach has to have a gut for what to do in that moment.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate because I largely agree with you, but I think the data people would say that same scenario that you just mentioned, like give it to him 4 times in a row and he got 5 yards. And yes, that next time he may get 5 yards again. But if you do that in enough scenarios where that keeps get repeated, the data will tell you that maybe you shouldn't do that. It may work one time. And it goes back to this, what was the show we did on stereotypes, right? And it goes back to, when you take a big group, you may have a stereotype that works, but each individual person within that may break that stereotype. So I think the same thing, it's a data set, right? It's the same thing happens in the scenario you just described. So, any one particular instance may go against the data trends or what the data says you should do. But if you do it enough over time, maybe that 4th time that guy gets stacked up in the backfield.
Yeah,
you know
but
what
I'm
I
not
mean?
saying to do something because it worked 3 times, the next 30 times. What I'm saying,
No, I'm
in
saying
that moment.
I know, but I'm saying
In that moment.
but the data would tell you should pass the next time. But the coach says, "Hey, it's working. Let's keep at it."
Or the coach sees something. Maybe the defense is tired. Or, and we're going to have a guest on the show probably in April who's been with the Philadelphia Phillies for 30 years. And we're going to talk about Gabe Kapler versus Joe Girardi, who's coming in. And that was one of the knocks on Kapler, that he's 100% analytics. And, especially in relief pitching situations.
Yeah.
Well, it's a left-hand batter bringing this lefty, and this lefty against this particular lefty, has struck him out 4 times in a row. But we all know he just got racked for 5 runs last night. Maybe his confidence is shaken. Or a really good baseball manager might be like, you know what, let's try somebody else. Or let's just keep our righty just struck out 2 players in a row. Let's keep him in, even though it's righty versus lefty. I'm not talking about over the course of an entire game. But there's key moments in a game, every game, baseball, football, basketball, hockey, especially in the playoffs, where a gut decision, I think 1 or 2 or 3 times in that game, doesn't or shouldn't listen necessarily to the analytics.
I'm curious because you know more football than I do, but I love football. But for decades now, statistical people have been telling coaches they should go for it on 4th down much more often than they do. And they've only seen it really in the last 4 or 5 years where some coaches, Coach Peterson for the Eagles is definitely one of them, but it's still not prevalent. I mean, they're still risk averse, even though statistically they would do better overall if they went for it much more often on 4th down. Why don't they? I have a theory, by the way, but I want to hear your
there's a couple
theory.
Things. So to your point, and here's where I agree with analytics, because it's say an overarching premise for the whole game plan, right? There are high schools now
That don't punt.
They literally go for it wherever they are on 4th down.
Yep.
And they also do an onside kick after every field goal or touchdown.
Right.
Now, to take it a step further, traditional football purists say run on 1st down. Now they're showing analytics that a lot of times now the defense is ready for it. They stuff you on 1st down. Now you're in 2nd and long and 3rd and long, which is a very low percentage to get a 1st down.
Right.
So now why do you have to run on 1st down? So analytics are helping coaches, and Patriots do it a lot. Throw on 1st down. I'd rather have 2nd and 3 or 3rd and 1 So
Why aren't the coaches going for it more on fourth down when it's overwhelmingly they should be doing it a lot more than they are? I have a theory.
because no one ever got fired for hiring IBM.
That's
And
exactly right.
if you get stopped on, if it's 4th and 1 and you punt, no
Yep.
one's going to argue it.
Exactly
That's
right.
because we can't afford to get at the 50-yard line or 40-yard line to give the ball back to them. So they're never going to get in trouble for not doing it. However,
And it's one of 32 coveted jobs. And
yes,
when you get that job, you're going to try to protect that
it's job security.
Yep.
Now, coaches with some testicles are looking at the analytics and saying, well, wait a minute. Game scenario, depending on where you are in the field, time of the game, score of the game, right? Getting 4th and 1 is no harder than 1st and 2nd and 1 or 3rd and 1.
Right.
In fact, there are certain scenarios, don't worry about what down it is,
Right.
because they're proving in any sport, more possessions leads to more wins. So if you're punting, you're giving the ball up.
Right.
So that's why Peterson and a lot of these guys that are going for it on 4th down have a great percentage getting it on 4th.
Right.
The problem, and here's where the gut comes in, and this is the Peterson argument we had several months ago. He tends to go for it like a high school team, wherever he is. There was a 4th and 8 in a pretty important game on his own 42.
Yeah.
And I think we're texting each other. And I'm like, he's out of his mind.
Yeah. He actually got it, if you remember. He got it, but it was crazy.
But there was one he didn't get. I'm thinking about the one he didn't get.
Okay.
And if it's a 50-50 proposition, I'm against it if you're on your side of the field. So, gut would have told me, okay, unless you're down 3 scores and you got to go for it,
yeah.
he should have punted there. His gut, he just went with the analytics. And I like Peterson. I think he has used analytics to help us win a Super Bowl. But sometimes you got to peel back and add that gut and understand in the moment.
So I want to talk a couple things. Gambling. Analytics has totally fueled, in addition to the Supreme Court legalizing sports gambling. What does this do to the proliferation of gambling in sports? All this data, these prop bets. I mean, to me, I can't think of a bigger potential growth industry over the next 10 years than sports gambling. And I'm just curious your
And
thoughts.
marijuana.
Yeah, maybe. What do you think about how this is going to totally revolutionize how people watch sports? Obviously the amount of the billions of dollars that's going to be bet on sports, and the variety of ways that you can bet on sports. The data of this.
Here's what I see. In the old days, when it was just a pure gut
Right.
feel,
That's all it was.
or even worse, a pure guess,
Yeah.
based on the way things are set up in casinos, with the casino games, which are always, the percentages are out of the gate against the player. And, in sports gambling, there's the VIG or the juice where you're paying 10%. Now, they alter. It used to be 10% across the board no matter what. Now, if they're getting heavy on one side, they take it to 15%, 20%, 25% before they move the line. So they've gotten smart with analytics, realizing we'd rather have people betting more money to win the same amount, because if the same amount lose, we make even more money on that
Right.
percentage.
Right.
Here's how I see it changing things, though. It's keeping people from going bankrupt and keeping them in the game longer, because when you purely guess, it's a horrendous winning percentage.
Right.
It's like 2/3 of the time you're going to lose.
What are the neighborhood bookies going to do? They're going to go out of business.
They're going to go out
aren't
of
they?
business.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy now. FanDuel and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's super easy online, and it's fair. And they have a ton of options. You don't have to choose the traditional game. You can pick all sorts of wacky game props, player props to make it fun.
Right.
And you can also use analytics. There's an analytics sports company called 538, and they
Right,
give
yeah.
you all this stuff.
Right,
Or you can sign up for it. Analytics don't guarantee wins at all, but they almost guarantee you'll break even over time and just lose a little bit.
Right.
So the bookies of the world, the casinos of the world, the online gambling would rather you have lose a little bit over 50 years
Right.
than get killed in 1 year and never do it again.
And have trouble collecting it.
Analytics is helping
Yeah.
make people at least not lose as much.
Right. And I think England was way ahead of us on all this sports betting stuff, that they were big on this it's been legal over there for 30, 40 years. So maybe we're following in their footsteps. Last part of this segment, Richie, is you mentioned, how do you intuit the intangible? So I was thinking of Patrick Mahomes, right? Patrick Mahomes comes into the league. He was not a particularly well-known and well-scouted college quarterback, and they have no pro data on him at all. He comes in and he's like the MVP of the league. So, I mean, how does a coach deal with that? One, the intangibles of a Tom Brady or some player who's just clutch versus a player who chokes, that intangible, and then the intangible of where there's not much data on someone. I mean, how do you make informed decisions? Is that when it goes almost all gut?
This is the age-old question they're still struggling with, right? Because in the Mahomes situation,
guy's a stud.
Guy's a total stud, but in his college scheme and college football, they weren't throwing 60 times a game.
Right.
And his teammates around him, some were good. They were an average team.
Right.
And sometimes you're forced to do things based on the game situation that didn't showcase his talents. In the NFL, when there's billions and billions of dollars behind a pro sport, you're going to try to showcase and leverage whatever helps you win.
Right.
Like, oh, we can roll this guy out. He can run. He can throw on in any direction. He can do so many things that they didn't know he could do and didn't want him to do in college. So, in some cases, a college player can exceed expectations in the pros and vice versa, where somebody in college looks like a stud, but in the pro system, they get squashed. And it's a lot of gut. If you remember Mike Mamula back, I think in the 90s.
Boston College guy.
He was
kind of a douche, by the way.
He was. He got in a lot of
had some
sexual assault.
Yeah, he had some issues at Boston College.
Also, in the Eagles training camp. But apparently, he was off the charts NFL Combine. His speed, his quickness, his strength, and his jumping ability. So although he was kind of hidden in a Boston College system and didn't have these earth-shattering statistics like a Reggie White, they said, you can't coach physicality. You can't coach height. You can't coach quickness and speed. They brought him in, and it just didn't work well in the NFL. So, but Tom Brady.
The other side of that is the Baltimore Ravens quarterback. He's the MVP of the league, and he was passed over by tons of teams because he didn't project as a pocket passer quarterback. Now he's the MVP of the league, and he's unstoppable in a lot of ways. So
they were going to make him a wide receiver.
I know.
Right?
I mean, so it goes both ways.
Well, it does. Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Slow as molasses.
6th round draft pick.
Can't jump.
Yeah. 6th round.
Doesn't seem tough. 6th round.
Yeah.
And yet his mind is probably the fiercest and toughest of any athlete out there, like a Michael Jordan.
Right.
Wasn't really measured in college because he didn't even play the whole career in college. So,
yeah, I mean,
they haven't figured it out. Analytics has not figured out the individual and how it will project. Often it does, but often it's dead wrong.
By the way, just last thing, we'll have to move on. But do you know that they're now looking at the shot angle of college players early on, and they're able to look at the arc of the shot to make sure that they're looking at the ideal arc to have the highest percentage to go in. And in many cases, they highlighted one example where I read where this guy from Tennessee, he was shooting 31% because he had a lower arc, and then he increased his arc, and now he's like a 41% shooter. So, I mean, it's really going to that level where the computers are actually coaching.
I took my daughter from a 5% shooter to a 10% shooter. And this is no lie. I'm coaching her 5th grade team, right? And I noticed she's just line driving the ball. So we started working.
A lot like her father?
I was a good shooter. You know that. So I was showing her, the arc increases the surface area of where a ball can go. I said, look at the top of a hoop.
Right.
Now look at it from the side, right?
Yeah.
So literally she was making 1 out of 20. Now she's making 1 out of 10.
Nice.
So it's true. That kind of analytics.
Maybe that's what you should be doing. Coaching.
Maybe.
All right, Richie. So final comments before we move on to highlighting some really bad coaching decisions in the past.
So I've heard arguments on both sides where 100% analytics over a long sample size will get you the most wins. And then I have other guys that, 100% gut, because when the pressure's on the line and how humans behave, you have to have a feel in that moment.
And that's why you pay coaches big bucks.
I've come to the conclusion that it's both.
What would you say the ideal percentage should be mixing?
You know, before I thought gut was more important. I now think analytics, I would say 60-40, 70-30, where, gut should not be used as much. And you have to also then analyze the personality of the coach. Is he a gambler? Is he conservative? But I think analytics are changing the game and getting the most out of the players, their teams, and scenarios. But, one out of 3 plays, 1 out of 4 plays, you could go with your gut.
See, I think from a coaching perspective, I think that you should always go with the analytics part. But coaching, of course, is way more than that. It's the personal interaction with humans and the psychology, the motivation of the players. All that you can't get from a computer. So, I mean, to me, that's where coaches should focus and let the analytics dictate the X's and O's. That's my feel. So
I'll go with it. The analytics cannot factor in the current state of motion, stress, pressure, and how that person reacts. Just like in the military, right? You don't know how someone's going to act in battle, and that really leads to wins or losses. And that's the part a coach should be able to recognize, like, I'm not going to go to him on this play, or I'm not going to run that just because analytics said. And I'll stick with analytics as the prevalent mode to follow, but without gut, you're leaving a lot on the table.
Okay, so good discussion there. We're going to move on, Richie. I'm going to highlight I picked out 4, one for each major sport, and then I picked a hometown one because,
I thought we were global.
We are global, but, it's pretty evident that we're in the Philadelphia area, so we'll pick that one out. These are horrendous coaches' decisions, so feel free to chime in and editorialize, Richie. If you're going to punish your best player, wait till you have the gold medal around your neck. At the 1980 Olympics, USSR hockey coach Viktor Tikhonov did not follow that advice. Tikhonov pulled star goalie Vladislav Tretiak. Do you remember him?
Tretiak, yep.
After he allowed the U.S. team to tie the score 2-2 in the first period. With the Soviets' second-string goalie on the ice, the 7th-seeded American squad knocked out the heavily favored in what became as the Miracle on Ice. I had totally forgotten that. Tretiak was the best goalie in the world. And I had forgot that, before I read this, that it was against the second-string goalie, and it was probably the most famous ice hockey game in the United States, at least, of all time.
It might be the most famous hockey game in the world of all time.
Yeah.
But in all due fairness to the second-string goalie, he only gave up 2 goals in 2 periods.
Right.
Because
but there's a
and they won 4-3.
But Tretiak's the best goalie in the world.
Could have shut them out most likely.
There's a perfect example where gut probably didn't serve him too well.
That was a bad decision.
Number 2, Red Sox manager John McNamara spent the entire '86 playoffs subbing in Dave Stapleton as a defensive replacement for first baseman Bill Buckner late in games. Then, up 5-3 and ready to clinch the title in Game 6 of the '86 World Series, McNamara smelled victory and got sentimental. He left Buckner in for the bottom of the 10th inning. It's not like Buckner was hobbled enough to miss a routine ground ball or anything, though.
Wow. It did take a bit of a bad hop. I've watched that replay many times, and there is like a 2-inch hop, which he still should have caught. But it's that poor guy.
Can you imagine if the Red Sox hadn't come back and won again in the 2000s? I mean,
that. And Bill Buckner was a great guy, a great player, but he's always remembered for that one
that ruined
huge
him.
mistake.
That ruined him. He never got over that, really.
They finally, after 20 years,
brought him back.
And with the Red Sox winning, they brought him back, and everybody hugged it out. But I would say, for 20 years, he had a tough life.
And I don't think they would have brought him back if they hadn't won the World Series in 2004. I think that would have been still too painful.
You're probably right.
Though Byron Russell did have success defending Michael Jordan in the '97 finals, you can't send him out there to guard the GOAT one-on-one in the 1998 championship game on the line. Anyhow, we doubt any single defender could have stopped him. The clear call was to double team Jordan and take the ball out of his hands and let someone else win the game. Yet Jazz coach Jerry Sloan sent out Russell alone. One ruthless crossover preceded a perfect shot, and the NBA Finals were over. Yeah, that people forget that that's Belichick's genius is he takes away the best player on the other team, right? And a lot of other coaches do that too. When we coach, that's what I used to do, try to take away what they wanted to do. And playing Jordan, the best player in the world, best player maybe ever, 101 with a game on the line, just double him up, make whoever else beat him.
No one ever got fired for doubling up Michael Jordan, right? Because
Exactly.
even if they lost because someone else hit his shot or,
Yeah.
I had to stop him.
And the Jazz, I don't think have ever won a championship, right?
They have not.
Yeah. By late in the fourth quarter, Super Bowl 49, Marshawn Lynch had 102 yards, 1 touchdown, and the confidence of God after 5 days of creation. If you asked anyone, they would have called for Lynch to get the ball, 2nd and goal, to steal the title from New
No-brainer.
England. Too obvious, right? Seattle coach Pete Carroll believed. He called for a pass, which was intercepted with 20 seconds to play. Seattle lost 28-24.
Here's why this is so egregious. So, I guess there was a player on Seattle who ended up on New England. They
Right.
practiced.
Right.
They practiced the pass that Carroll called, where it's almost like a pick play, where the inside
Right,
receiver
yeah. The slot
is
guy,
supposed to
yeah.
block the cornerback, and
Right.
then the outside receiver cuts in, and it's a timing play.
Right.
In Wilson's defense, you have to get rid of the ball quickly.
Right.
But they had practiced against that play. Hey, be ready for this on the goal line. And even the cornerback, I forget his name, called it out. Like,
Yeah.
this could be coming. And there's an example.
Butler,
right?
Malcolm Butler, wasn't it? Something?
Malcolm Butler.
Yeah.
They are running the ball down their throats. And it's proven that a good offensive line over the course of a game can wear a good defensive line down.
Right.
And that defensive line was tired. I think they had given up. He almost just scored the play before, but he
Yeah.
got tripped up.
Right, yeah.
Or he just got tripped up, ankle tackle, or he would have scored. Give it to him again. It worked 3 times in a row. They're tired. They can't stop you. And beast mode.
Yeah.
It's tough to stop him even if you hit him at the line. So I think one of the worst calls
I wonder
in NFL history.
I wonder what the analytics would have said to do, because Pete Carroll definitely seems like more of a gut guy, but boy, oh boy, that doesn't even line up with gut. I mean, gut would have been like, hey, let's keep running it down their throats. It's only 2nd down, by the way.
Yeah, I don't even know that
They had a
Seahawks-
timeout too, didn't they?
They did. I don't. It's even worse when you add that in there. There was no reason not to give him the ball again. Maybe some analytics said, in this situation, down and distance scenario, they're going to really stack the box, put 10 men on the line of scrimmage, throw it. But I was still shocked because my friends and family, we all bet the Patriots that game, and we were sulking, punching each other, how we're idiots, and then there was a huge celebration.
Can you imagine being a Seattle fan? Almost as bad as being an Atlanta Falcons fan a few years later.
That might be even worse.
All right, Richie. So all those were in critical moments. This one, not so much, but it's a local favorite, so I'll just highlight it. 1978 NFL season. The New York Giants had seemingly won the game versus the Philadelphia Eagles with an expected kneel down from quarterback Joe Pisarcik. Instead of a kneel, the Giants' offensive coordinator, Bob Gibson, instructed Pisarcik to hand it off to Larry Zonka. Pisarcik, who was skeptical but had already been reprimanded by the coaching staff earlier that year, went along with it and promptly fumbled. The ball one-hopped off the turf into the hands of Philly's Herman Edwards, who ran it into the end zone for an improbable win. It's called the Miracle in the Meadowlands. In this case, heads rolled. Giants fired Gibson the next day.
Well, and this is the reason taking a knee wasn't necessarily the prevalent, guaranteed thing to do in every kill the clock, you're already won the game scenario. Still in college, they typically don't take a knee. They always hand the ball off. I don't know why, but back then, taking a knee wasn't the norm. After that play, every team in the NFL for the next 42 years takes a knee. And then there was also a Miracle in the Meadowlands, too.
With Deshaun Jackson.
There's another example. Yeah. So you have the fastest player in the NFL. The only way he can lose if he runs the punt back
If
Punt
they
it
kick
out of
it,
bounds.
if they kick it to him, right?
Punt
Remember
it out of bounds.
Tom Coughlin came running on the field and like screaming at the punter. Why'd you kick it to him?
Just kick it out of bounds. I mean, there's some under pressure though. The human mind can buckle.
Well, that was a fun show, Richie, and make sure you listen next episode. And again, we're trying to schedule this guy, and we think it'll be a great guest, but we're having trouble lining up the dates. So there's a possible audible again for our next episode. But if not, we're going to talk about lobbyists, Rich.
Oh, boy.
And most everyone knows that lobbyists are an embedded part of our political system, but I'm guessing you don't know the extent of it. And we're going to make you sick by telling you how much lobbyists run our political world and our lives next episode.
How corrupt is it?
It's awful, and we're going to make you sick next episode. How's that sound? Don't eat. Don't eat before the next episode.
I'd rather you make our audience sick than put them to sleep.
We shall do that. As always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See y'all next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Please download, subscribe, share, and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and also our website.
True love won't say goodbye. True love.